"Can I fix your impossible car for a meal?" The old man's quiet words were met with brutal laughter. The mechanics at the elite garage saw a beggar, not the icon who once conquered the world's most dangerous tracks. The biting scent of ozone and hot metal hung in the air at Apex Motors, a sterile cathedral of glass and polished concrete where automotive gods were worshipped. For 3 agonizing days, however, a deity had fallen. A Ferrari 812 superfast, scarlet and sleek, sat stubbornly silent, its glorious V12 engine exposed and mocked by the persistent glow of a check engine light. Julian Thorne, the owner of Apex, a man whose sharp suit and sharper smile were his primary tools, stared at the car with a venomous glare. His 2 top mechanics, Leo and Ben, young, arrogant, and fueled by energy drinks, circled the vehicle like vultures. Still nothing. Julian's voice was a low growl. Leo threw a wrench onto a nearby tray with a clatter of frustration. "We've run every diagnostic, Julian. The factory reps are stumped. It's a ghost in the machine." It was then that a real ghost drifted in. An old black man, maybe 60, with a storm of silver hair and a face etched with the kind of deep lines that tell stories of hardship. His coat was worn thin, but his eyes, clear and perceptive, held a strange, focused light as they settled on the crippled Ferrari. He stood at the threshold of the open bay door, a silent observer, until he finally spoke, his voice raspy but steady. "I can fix it, in exchange for a hot meal." The silence that followed was broken by a sudden, barking laugh from Ben. Leo snorted, turning away to hide his grin. Julian's perfectly sculpted expression curdled into one of profound disgust. "Listen, Grandpa, this isn't a soup kitchen," Ben sneered, wiping grease from his hands. "We don't trade charity for delusional fantasies." The old man didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed on the engine bay. "It's not a fantasy. The problem isn't mechanical. It's electronic. Your fuel pressure regulator is sending intermittent, faulty signals to the ECU. The engine is protecting itself." The mechanics stopped laughing. Maya Lin, the workshop's only female technician, looked up from the brake assembly she was rebuilding in the corner. She'd been watching the exchange, and something about the old man's unwavering posture, the sheer certainty in his quiet declaration, snagged her attention. He didn't look like a man guessing. He looked like a man stating a fact. Julian, however, felt his authority being challenged. And how would a man who sleeps on the street know that from a 30-foot distance? "Did you get your degree from a dumpster?" "I can hear it," the old man replied simply. The slight hesitation in the starter motor, the uneven hum from the fuel pump. The signature is unmistakable. The arrogance returned to Julian's face, now twisted into a cruel smirk. "An unmistakable signature. Huh? Okay, I'll play your little game." He pulled out his high-end smartphone. "Here's the deal. I'll give you one chance. You use our diagnostic scanner. If you can prove that specific fault code is active, I'll buy you the biggest, juiciest burger in the city." He paused, letting the cruelty sink in. "But if you're wrong, I get to film your complete and utter humiliation. I'll post it online for the world to see what happens when a homeless nobody tries to play expert in my shop." "Deal." Solomon, for that was his name, finally turned his gaze from the car to Julian. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Deal." The atmosphere in the workshop shifted from mockery to a kind of tense, predatory anticipation. Julian was already recording, narrating with a smug tone for his future online audience. "So we got a real-life prodigy here, folks. Straight off the streets, about to teach us all a lesson." Leo and Ben flanked the multi-$1,000 diagnostic rig, whispering bets to each other. $50 says he can't even figure out how to power it on," Leo murmured, loud enough for Solomon to hear. Solomon approached the complex machine, a tower of screens and cables that would intimidate a seasoned technician. Without a word, he connected the OBD2 cable to the Ferrari's port with a practiced, fluid motion. His weathered fingers, calloused and scarred, moved across the touchscreen interface with a speed and precision that was utterly mesmerizing. He didn't hunt for menus. He knew their exact location, bypassing general diagnostics and diving deep into the car's central nervous system. He navigated submenus and accessed proprietary data streams that even Leo rarely touched. No way. Ben breathed, his jaw slack. Those are restricted developer pathways. How does he know the access protocols? Julian stopped his narration, his smirk faltering as he zoomed in on the screen. The old man was not just pressing buttons. He was conducting a symphony of data. The scanner beeped and whirred, charts and live readings flashing across the display. For a full minute, the only sound were the clicks of the machine and the collective, held breath of everyone in the room. Then, Solomon's finger tapped a single line of text on the screen. He turned, his calm eyes meeting Julian's. "There it is," he said, his voice even. "Fault code P0191. Fuel rail pressure sensor circuit range / performance." Just as I said, a heavy silence descended. Leo leaned in, his eyes wide as he stared at the screen. The color drained from his face. He's right. That's it. That's the code. He looked up, a mixture of shock and disbelief on his face. 3 days. 3 days we've been hunting for this, and he found it in less than 5 minutes. Julian quickly lowered his phone, his face flushing with anger. The public humiliation he'd planned had just evaporated. "Beginner's luck," he snapped, the words sounding hollow even to himself. "You just got lucky." Solomon almost smiled. "Luck?" He gestured back to the Ferrari. "Luck doesn't tell you that this specific failure on the 812 Superfast is a precursor to a cascade failure in the ignition coils within the next 10,000 miles if the fuel filter isn't also replaced with the updated part number. Does it?" He then turned his head, his gaze falling upon a gleaming BMW M8 competition tucked away in a corner bay. "And luck doesn't tell you that the owner of that M8 doesn't need the new $25,000 engine you quoted him for. The issue is a faulty high-pressure fuel pump, a $1,500 part. You can hear the distinctive metallic whine on startup if you just take a moment to listen instead of just looking at profit margins." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Julian froze, his face a mask of fury and panic. He had been exposed, not just as a lesser mechanic, but as a cheat by the very man he had sought to disgrace. Julian's face cycled through shades of red and white. To be so thoroughly and publicly unmasked was a new and agonizing experience. "Get out," he finally spat, the words dripping with venom. "I don't know what kind of cheap hustler you are, but your little magic show is over. Get out of my shop." He reached into his wallet, pulled out a $20 bill, crumpled it, and threw it at Solomon's feet. "Here's your charity. Now leave before I call the cops for trespassing." Solomon looked down at the crumpled bill, then back up at Julian. His eyes held a profound, ancient sadness. "I told you I wanted a meal, not money." He said nothing more. He didn't pick up the bill. He simply turned and walked towards the open bay door, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying a weight no one else could see. The arrogant laughter had vanished, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. He had won the bet, yet he moved like a man who had just lost something irreplaceable. Maya watched him go, a knot tightening in her stomach. She hurried to the large window overlooking the street, just in time to see him pause at the corner. He was standing in front of a telephone pole, looking at a faded, rain-streaked flyer. It was a missing person poster for a little girl with bright eyes and a wide smile, posted years ago and long forgotten by the world. Solomon stood there for a long moment, his hand gently tracing the outline of the child's face on the paper. The image of this powerful, brilliant man showing such quiet, heartbreaking tenderness struck Maya deeply. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed something far more significant than a garage dispute. That night, she couldn't sleep. The man's surgical knowledge, his familiarity with developer-level diagnostics, the way he spoke of engine faults like a doctor discussing a patient's chronic illness, it all pointed to a level of expertise that couldn't be learned on the streets. Driven by a relentless curiosity, she sat at her computer. She typed in the specific terms he had used: Ferrari 812P0191, cascade ignition coil failure, BMW S63 high-pressure fuel pump whine. The search results led her down a rabbit hole of highly specialized engineering forums and motorsport discussion boards. The information was dense, technical, and far beyond the scope of a standard mechanic. Then she found it on a Le Mans engineering forum. In a thread dated 15 years prior, a user with the handle Apex_Phantom had written a startlingly prescient analysis. He had predicted the exact fuel pressure regulator issue in the next generation of V12 engines, years before the 812 Superfast was even designed. He theorized about the long-term effects on ignition coils with an authority that was breathtaking. The writing style was concise, brilliant, and utterly confident. It was him. It had to be. Who was Apex_Phantom? And who was the man who now wandered the city streets, haunted by ghosts of the past? The next morning, the tension at Apex Motors was a palpable thing. Julian was irritable, barking orders, while Leo and Ben worked in a subdued, resentful silence. The mystery of the old man had unsettled them. Just before noon, the glass doors to the showroom slid open and Solomon walked in. But this time he was not alone. At his side was McLaren Vance, a woman who radiated an aura of quiet power and immense wealth. She was known throughout the city's elite circles for her discerning taste and her formidable car collection. Julian's jaw nearly hit the floor. He recognized her instantly. He also recognized the car she had arrived in, which was being rolled into the bay by a flatbed truck. A legendary McLaren P1, a hybrid hypercar so complex that it had become Julian's most public and expensive failure. He'd had the car for a month and had finally admitted defeat, telling Mrs. Vance it was irreparable. "Mr. Thorne," Eleanor said, her voice smooth but with an edge of steel. "I believe you know this gentleman." Julian stammered, "Mrs. Vance? What is he doing with you?" "He was kind enough to diagnose my P1's problem last night in a hotel parking garage, based solely on my description of the issue," Eleanor explained coolly. He described a conflict in the software protocols between the electric motor and the combustion engine's control modules, a known, but confidential, defect in the 2015 models. He said you wouldn't have been able to find it because McLaren never made the service bulletin public. The workshop fell silent. Maya quickly typed on her terminal, and her eyes widened as she found a leaked European technical bulletin describing the exact problem. It was information only a high-level factory insider or a top-tier racing engineer would know. "I'm bringing the car here," Eleanor continued, her gaze fixed on Julian, "to give him the opportunity to fix it. Here, in your shop." The unspoken challenge was clear. Julian, trapped by the presence of a hugely influential client, could not refuse. His face pale with rage and humiliation, he could only nod. Of course. He offered Solomon another bet, this one laced with desperation. "You have 3 hours. If you can't fix it, you never show your face here again." Solomon simply nodded and approached the McLaren. He laid a hand on its carbon fiber body, a gesture of almost reverent familiarity, as if greeting a long-lost friend. What followed was not mechanics, it was artistry. For the next 3 hours, Solomon worked with a focused intensity that held the entire shop in a trance. He didn't use brute force. His movements were precise, economical, and deeply intuitive. He was one with the machine. While he worked, Eleanor approached Maya. "There's a profound sadness in him," she said quietly. "I found him last night, sitting on a curb, looking at a worn photograph of a little girl. He was crying. He said he failed her, and that he spent every day since trying to find purpose." The words struck Maya like a physical blow. The missing child poster, the haunted eyes, it all clicked into place, forming a picture of a grief so vast it had swallowed a manhole. Just as the 3-hour mark approached, Solomon closed the engine cover. He looked up, a flicker of old fire in his eyes. "Start it." Eleanor got in, pushed the button, and the McLaren P1 roared to life with a perfect, harmonious thunder that shook the very foundations of the garage. The problem was gone. The miracle was complete. The successful repair of the McLaren P1 was the final piece of the puzzle for Maya. As Eleanor Vance wrote a personal check to Solomon, which he politely refused, asking only that she donate it to a children's charity, Maya was already back at her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She cross-referenced the username Apex_Phantom with Le Mans race archives from 15 years ago. The results hit her with the force of a physical impact. Staring back at her from a screen was a younger version of the man in their workshop. He was smiling, covered in sweat and champagne, holding a massive trophy. The caption read, "Solomon, the Phantom, Vance, celebrating his third consecutive victory at the 24 Hours of Le Mans." The articles told the whole tragic story. Vance was a living legend, an engineering genius and a fearless driver, known for his almost supernatural ability to feel a car's limits. Then came the crash, a catastrophic failure caused by a new, untested alloy in the suspension, a cost-cutting measure by the team owner that Vance had vehemently protested. He survived the fiery wreck, but his 9-year-old daughter, Lily, watching from the stands, suffered a massive heart attack from the shock. She died before the ambulance could reach the hospital. Consumed by guilt and grief, Solomon Vance, the Phantom, simply vanished. He gave away his fortune and disappeared from the world, leaving behind only a legend. Her heart pounding, Maya grabbed her laptop and rushed back into the workshop, ready to share her discovery. But she stopped dead in her tracks. Julian, flanked by Leo and Ben, was in the middle of the shop floor, phone in hand, recording another video. And you won't believe it, the old bum actually got lucky with the McLaren. Julian was saying to the camera, his voice oozing with condescending amusement. "But he's still just a crazy, homeless coot. Watch this." He then began to theatrically imitate Solomon, hunching his shoulders and shuffling his feet. "Can I fix it for food?" he croaked in a mocking, raspy voice. Leo and Ben howled with laughter, adding their own cruel impersonations. "We're gonna post this and call it the magical hobo mechanic," Ben snickered. "It'll go viral for sure." The casual cruelty of it, the utter lack of humanity, made Maya's blood run cold. "Stop it," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Stop it right now." Julian lowered his phone, annoyed. "What's your problem, Lynn? Can't you take a joke?" "That's not a joke," Maya said, her voice rising. "That's a man you're mocking. A man whose shoes none of you are worthy of polishing." She slammed her laptop down on a workbench and spun it around for them to see. On the screen was the photo of Solomon Vance, in his prime, holding the Le Mans trophy high. "You want to know who your hobo mechanic is?" she announced to the silent workshop. "Allow me to introduce you to Solomon Vance. 3-time Le Mans champion, celebrated race engineer, and one of the greatest drivers in the history of motorsport. A legend you've been treating like dirt." The laughter died in their throats. Julian stared at the screen, his face turning the color of ash. Leo and Ben looked as if they had seen a ghost. In the deafening silence, the glass doors of the showroom slid open once more. Solomon Vance stood in the doorway. Behind him were Eleanor Vance and 2 men in immaculate, tailored suits. The air crackled with a sudden, immense pressure. Julian, Leo, and Ben were frozen, their faces etched with horror and dawning comprehension. Julian Thorne, one of the suited men, said, his voice calm and authoritative. He was Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling Performance Group, the largest high-performance automotive conglomerate on the coast. "Mrs. Vance told me an incredible story. When she told me your name was Solomon Vance, I had to come myself. I'm here to offer you the position of Chief Technical Director for our entire racing division. We'll start the offer at 7 figures. Solomon's gaze didn't waver from Julian. He had seen the phone still in his hand, angled to record. "What were you doing?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Before a sputtering Julian could answer, Maya stepped forward. "He was filming this," she said, and played back the last few seconds of the video, filling the silent workshop with Julian's mocking voice. Richard Sterling's expression hardened into granite. He looked at Julian with utter contempt. "Mr. Thorne, my company has a fleet maintenance contract with this shop. Consider it terminated. Effective immediately. We do not do business with men who lack basic human decency." Eleanor Vance added, "I am the president of the Exotic Car Club of North America. Rest assured, by the end of the day, every single one of our 5,000 members will know exactly what kind of establishment you run here. The foundation of Julian's world crumbled in seconds. His biggest contract, his reputation, his future, all gone. Solomon walked slowly toward him, stopping just a few feet away. Yesterday, you threw money at my feet and told me to get out. You judged me for my clothes, for my appearance. You thought my knowledge was a trick and my poverty was a joke. He paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You didn't know I was once famous. But that's not the point. You didn't know I was a human being who deserved respect. He then turned to Maya. Thank you, he said, the words filled with a warmth that transformed his weathered face. For seeing a person, not a stereotype. He looked at Richard Sterling. I accept your offer, sir. On one condition. Ms. Lin will be joining me as my chief of staff. 6 months later, Apex Motors was boarded up, a monument to arrogance and prejudice. Julian Thorne declared bankruptcy, a pariah in the industry he once lorded over. The video that went viral wasn't his, but one pieced together by news outlets, telling the story of a legend who was scorned and the one woman who showed him kindness. Solomon Vance, with Maya by his side, led Sterling Performance to its most successful season in history. He established the Lily Vance Foundation for underprivileged youth, turning his pain into purpose. He proved that a person's worth is not defined by their wallet or their past, but by the content of their character. The greatest victory of his life wasn't on a racetrack, but in a grimy workshop where he reminded the world that you never know the giant who walks among you, disguised as a man in need. If this story moved you, share to spread the message that respect is universal. Let us know in the comments what true strength means to you. And please, always comment with respect for one another. Subscribe for more stories that remind us to look deeper